Welcome back to the Family Ties podcast. I'm Julia Avery, and this is my sister and special co-host, Kelly Ritchie.
Hi guys, Kelly Ritchie here. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're extremely excited. Before we get started though, we would like to invite each and every one of you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos, and share your thoughts and comments with us.
For those of you that are listening to our podcast, though, please do rate and subscribe wherever you do find your podcasts. We welcome your feedback as well as your suggestions and case recommendations especially. So please send that our way.
Today, we have a special guest to introduce you to. She has an incredible story and a past of dealing with abuse and trauma that is both shocking and full of hope at the same time. She has taken control of her personal narrative and is using her voice to educate and inspire those around her. Today, we're very honored to be speaking with Lori Poland, the Executive Director of the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect.
Hi, it's good to be here. That was a really elegant intro.
Oh, thank you. We're working on getting a little bit more fine-tuned.
Like, man, if people talk about me like that, I'm like, oh, yes. It's like super empowering.
Well, you are extremely empowering.
Yeah.
And I told Julia, I was like, I found somebody who's doing my dream job. Like, it's incredible. Like, this person is just amazing. So I've watched clips that, on YouTube where you've appeared, and I've been listening to your podcast, which has been incredibly encouraging.
Yeah, I've been listening to your podcast a ton. I've downloaded all of them on my Spotify, and I listen to them on my trips while I'm on the plane, and I'm like,
well, I hope that they're not too disheartening and really, at the end of the day, there's just anything that's worthy of really talking about is not really something anybody wants to talk about. When we're talking about real life, we're talking about hard stuff, and child abuse and neglect is just another one of those hard things. And my hope at the end of the day is that we can truly bring joy to the topic. And I know that sounds like, what? Why would you even say that, you crazy woman?
No.
But I have, the reason I wake up a lot of days, there's another reason I wake up, but there's a bigger reason why I get up, right? And the reason I get up most days is because I know that I've got something great to live for. And that's not because I had this horrible experience, but this horrible experience certainly has informed why I do what I do and how I live my life and every relationship I have and how I live in integrity. And I only want people in my life that have that. And that's hard for people in my life. You can ask my partner, every day, it's hold them to the fire. And it's because we have to have hard conversations in order to get through it. And there's so much joy. So I hope that when you are listening on your trips, thanks first of all for listening. And second, I hope that when you are listening, that it there's a lot of laughter and joy and even silliness, because we're just, I always say on our podcast, we're real people having real conversation.
Yes.
And about a topic that nobody wants to talk about, right? It's politics and what are the other things? Religion. Yeah.
True crime. And that's a very hard line to walk, especially, people love true crime. There's a huge audience out there for it. But, when you start covering stories that involve children, nobody wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's no longer enjoyable for people to listen to. And I'm not saying people enjoy listening to true crime, because it makes them feel good. But there's something about things that involve children that make it something that people just don't want to look at. They don't want to pay attention to it. It's uncomfortable. And that's kind of why Julia and I take the focus of covering cases of children, both past and present, so we can learn from it, and so they aren't forgotten. And so your work is encouraging in the fact that it's giving people an outlet to impact other people in their lives positively.
Cool.
Yeah. It's very empowering because, like you said, anything that's worth really talking about, anything that's really meaningful is going to be a difficult conversation. But something I really appreciate about the work that you do is that you find a way to place it in an empowering light where you're not allowing it to define you. It is, everything in our past, I believe, is a catalyst for our future. You just have to decide how it acts as a catalyst for what. And I really like the way that you have used yours to, not only create awareness, but you're also bringing other people into the fold to also try to form their catalyst in the correct way. So I love it.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And we would like you to kind of tell the audience, because I think they're probably like, what are they talking about here? But before I move on to that, I want to just shout out one of the last 3 podcast episodes I listened to was with Jen Elizabeth, I think.
I love Jen.
And as I was listening to her, I was like, wait, that's my story. That's my story exactly. I need to know this person. This person needs to be my best friend.
Yep. Do you want me to intro you?
I would love that. I was so inspired by what she had to say. And I think she said it beautifully. All the issues around shame and
she's
dealing
a firehouse for sure. She's an incredible person. Yeah. That's an easy intro. I'll do that. It's going on my list.
Yay. So moving on, we would love it if you would, describe, what happened to you, the abuse that led to you, where you are now, and the work that you're doing presently.
For sure. Yeah. All right. So once upon a time, there was a little girl, and she was born in 1980, and her name was Lori, and that's me. And I grew up in a pretty poor town. All right. I'm going to rewind. So that was my rewind.
I love it.
I'm just going to caveat here because there are some people in my world that listen to every podcast that I do. And they're close in my life, like in my immediate family. And there's only less than a handful of them. And every time I podcast or every time I speak, they get enraged. And I do this 3 to 5 times a week. So you can imagine the anger on a weekly basis. So I just need to caveat that sometimes when I don't say I have these people that completely disagree with everything I say. They call me a liar. They call me all these things. They've completely rewritten my story. They've accused me of all these crazy things that I've had to fact check because I genuinely began to question myself in the last 6 months. And I'm not going to do that today. So I'm just going to tell my story and not disclaim everything, because I found myself immediately feeling guilty saying that I grew up in the ghetto, and it was the freaking ghetto. Okay. Let's just start there. It was a tough neighborhood. You don't go there even to this day at night. It was, the ghetto, and our little area was cool because we're all poor and in it together. And so, even in your community, you create community. It doesn't matter how much money you have or whatever, we had our community, but I grew up in a tough neighborhood, period. Oh, so exhausting. Anyways, so, fast forward 3 years after my birth, I was this darling little blonde 3-year-old. I have videos of me and I just want to squeeze me because I was so cute. I love little kids. And I was one of them, man. I just I had a fire in me then, and I still do. And I'm not as gentle with myself now as I ought to be, but On August 22nd, 1983, it was my dad's birthday. He took the day off of work because he wanted to. Like, we take our birthdays off. And it was hot, August, Colorado, super dry. He was painting our house on the outside, and everybody's outside. It's the middle of the day. My mom had come home for lunch. She, went back to work. And like 5 minutes after she went back to work, my dad went inside, and my brother and I were outside, and he was hanging closer to the house, and I was being this sassy little, I can do whatever I want 3-year-old. So I was like down closer to the street. And again, my dad's work, like I could throw a rock and hit his work. So everybody on our street worked across the street. All of our houses were owned by the owner of the work. So like it was literally a community. And people are out having lunch on the grass, walking, whatever. And this car just drove up. The passenger door is already open. When he pulls up, he asks if I like candy. And like any sugar-loving 3-year-old, I'm like, dude, yeah. I don't know if I said dude, but I'm just filling that in. So I was like, yeah. And so we negotiated, and I just hopped right on in, because that's what, somebody's nice to you, they lure you, like that's just what you do, right? And so in hindsight, I wish I would have said a different word, right? But I didn't. And I got in the car and off we went. And we were gone. Seconds later, my dad came back outside, like just a moment later. He looked at the curb, he looked at my brother, he looked at the curb again. My pants were on the sidewalk. And he's like, my brother makes this sound, and my dad's best friend throws his keys at him, and he's like, go get her. So my dad hops in the car, drives down the street, and gets to the end of the street, and like doesn't even know what direction to go, like right or left, because I was gone, And so he rushes home and makes what he describes as, I think, it's changed since then, but what he described at one point as the worst call of his life, which was to my mom. And that was to say Lori was taken. And then, I don't know if he called my mom first or 911, but somebody called 911. And the 911 operator, his name is Terry, and we're good friends. He's like a motivational speaker all over the world, and has this like talk show, and he's just a cool guy.
Oh, that's so great.
He was like 19, first week on the job, 911 operator.
Wow.
And they're like the Sheridan Police Department at that time was like 5 men deep, and I just imagine like Opie and, what's that show? Like Andy Griffith, kind of like, just like the sweetest little town police, that nothing like this would ever happen. And so, of course, in their town, they're like wanting to protect and help and whatever. And so I don't know what happened between the moment I got in that car and then the moment that I was found, except I have a few memories. I have like a few photographic memories. And I'll just kind of describe what I've been told happened, and what I have these interviews, these videos of me after my abduction, where I describe in a 3-year-old's language what happened. And so I, putting all the pieces together and having these clinical notes and all of these things that I have, it does help a little bit. But my abductor never like came clean and said, well, first we went here, and then we went here, and then we did this. Like, he wasn't going to do that. Right. So anyhow, he took me to the mountains in Colorado, about 20 miles west of Denver, and just found a dirt road. And then he found an old abandoned outhouse, and he proceeded to do whatever he wanted to do with me. And when he was done, he put me in the bottom of the outhouse toilet. Now, there's debate on how deep the toilet was, but it was deep enough that I couldn't get out. So it doesn't really matter how deep it was. And he left me there, and he left me there to starve to death. He left me there for dead. And it wasn't, honestly, I did an interview on the Dr. Oz show in February, and that was the first time I realized, like, wow, like he literally, like, I was starving to death. Like, that's that's torture. That's like the meanest way, at least put somebody out of their misery, right? I'm glad that he didn't, because I'm here to talk to you fine folks. But it's kind of crazy, right? And so anyways, 4 days later, I was crying in this toilet, crying for my mom, and bird watchers happened to be driving by, and the wife had to use the bathroom. And they looked at the outhouse that I was in, and the husband's like, we're going to keep looking. We'll find something else. And so like a mile down the road, she says, you need to turn around and go back. And like any good husband, he listened and turned around, and they heard me crying. And so eventually they looked down and they said, what are you doing here? And I told them that I lived there. And again, I think that alone, that's the title of my book. My book's coming out this end of summer, beginning of fall. And because it really speaks to the power of how we create new normal in our environments.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how old or young we are, we just kind of embrace and accept our environment for what it is. And especially our children, if they don't know any different, they don't get any different. And so for me, it was my new normal. Like I literally thought I lived in the bottom of a toilet. And so I was rescued and reunited with my family. And you can imagine the trauma that my family went through. My brother, who was 5, my mom and dad, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, our community. Like it just goes on and on and on and on. And even to this day, when I share my story, like I think it was last week, I was doing a speech, and it was to a group of survivors. And I've given thousands of speeches, and I've never had this happen. But this woman was like, interrupted me like right about this point. And she was like, this is too much. You need to stop, and you need to let us process. You are just too much. And I was like, I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt super shameful. I felt like all the old stories of like the words that I've heard a lot in my life. And I just was like, so I know that even to this day, my story impacts people. And sometimes I tell it fairly nonchalantly, and like it just kind of rolls off my tongue because I've been telling it for so long. But there's so much good that's come out of it. And we can talk about that next. But that's my story. That's what you asked about.
Yes, that's amazing. And I have like some burning questions after listening to the podcast, and I know Julia does as well. But just briefly going back to your story, talking about the normalcy, kids finding normalcy in the situations they're in. I think that's why like a lot of kids like us in our situation never did that cry for help, or it was just our normal. That's what we thought life was. And so I think a lot of kids find themselves in that situation, many different types of situations like that. But they're, to them, that's either what they deserve, or that's just life.
Right. So, like a parent that doesn't feed them, a parent that neglects them, a parent that yells at them. Like we just assume that that's our normal. Right.
And that's why a lot of kids don't end up, at least I think, becoming vocal for themselves, because they think that's normal. They think that's a lot of other people probably live like that, which they do, and it's not right. But, they act as if it's normal. So especially when it comes, I think, to sexual abuse with children, because, that's their new normal now. And it's like, well, it's weird to say anything about it now. And so you just kind of adapt to it. And then it's when you get older and you have, like you said, the hindsight, and then you're like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other piece is, that's a huge reason why it's so important to talk about this, because unless we're talking about it, we don't know that it's abnormal. For most of us, we don't know that what we went through was something we shouldn't have gone through until we say to somebody what we went through, because nobody knows that, right? And nobody knows to even tell you that that's not what we do. And I think, for a lot of forms of abuse, all of them, it's why there's so much recidivism. Like, it's why it's such a generational issue, because we grow up and oftentimes raise our children in the same way that we know. And unless we are very, very intentional about breaking that cycle, it becomes our way of living, and we're just doing to them exactly what was done to us. And not always, specifically with sexual abuse. We know that most people who are sexually abused do not grow up to offend their children. But we also know that nearly all sex offenders were abused themselves. So, like, what did one of us get that the other didn't? Those are things that we need to understand.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, tell us about how, I would like to know a little bit more, if you feel up to sharing it. You don't have to give specifics, but I mean, I think clearly you've been through other forms of abuse throughout your life, by other people, whoever they may be. Julie and I are very familiar with that, but how is that something that led you to want to start this? And is that kind of what led you down this path?
I think that I was probably charging 5 cents for therapy when I was in like first grade. So I think that I was just born this person. And I've always felt like an outsider. I've always felt, I don't know if that was because of my kidnapping or before my kidnapping or what, but I've never felt like I belonged to my family. I've never felt like I've been in. And I think a lot of that is probably self-induced, right? Because I am so afraid of being rejected and abandoned that I'm not going to I'm not even going to get close enough to you to where you have the opportunity to reject me or abandon me. And I think that my family of origin are probably a prime example of that, because I know that as an infant, as a 3-year-old, a 36-month-old baby, that when you go through something like that, it can be really, really hard to rebuild that form of trust with your primary caregivers, even though my parents were not my perpetrators at all. But in my mind, I did not know the difference as to why they weren't there to get me. Like, why weren't they there to protect me? And when I came home, there were other forms of abuse, inappropriate sexual behavior between children, for a number of years that took place, for a number of years. And I mean, this is literally the third time ever I've said that out loud in a public platform. And I'm just in recent months becoming like, I have to own it all, or I can't be me. Like, either get it, Lori, or get off the stage. But nobody knows what it's like in my seat from my lens. And anybody that has something to say from the cheap seats can come down into the arena, just like Brene Brown says, and join me. And I'm happy to have a conversation, but that's a two-way conversation. It is not you talking at me, and it is not me talking at you. We will discuss. And there is room for both of us and both of our feelings. And I'm never going to rob somebody else of their experience, because I know what that feels like. And so I knew early on what it felt like to not matter, and what it felt like to feel like I was always on the outside. And I never wanted another human to feel that way, ever. And so, unfortunately, that created a magnet for me with people that were fairly unhealthy. I liked to rescue a lot of people. I like, if you're broken, like, there was a sign. Like relationships, you friends,
you have this just innate desire to fix. Just like, gotta fix this. We can fix this, right?
Well, and really what I think it is that I wish somebody had done it for me. I wish somebody had come in and rescued me. So let me rescue you. Like, I'll do everything in my power. I'll give you my home. I'll pay for everything. I'll let you say all these horrible things to me. You can cheat on me. You can, use and abuse and, whatever, you name it.
And it's weird, like part of that, like, trying to help others that really need it, that are not healthy, is also like, it feels in the moment like it's a form of therapy for yourself, because, you know how when sometimes people learn better when they try to teach someone else material they're trying to learn, because it really soaks in. I feel like it kind of works in the same way. You try to fix someone else and hopefully feel like by fixing them, you're also fixing yourself, but it's not.
It's like that. It's like that. The first time you show them, or the first time you tell them, the second time you show them, the third time you let them do it themselves. It's like that, right? Well, I'm actually going to do it for you. Here, watch. And then it backfires. And I think that culturally, because in the 70s and 80s, we had so many dual parents outside of the home, and we had a lot of latchkey children, that children who grew up in the 80s and 90s have a lot of attachment, and therefore they have a lot of personality disorders. There's a lot of narcissistic tendencies. There's a lot of borderline tendencies. There's a lot of antisocial tendencies, because we're all so protective of ourselves without even meaning to. And those personality disorders and those tendencies start, codependency, those start like usually before the age of 8, because it's how children stay alive. And we just don't even realize the imperativeness of how vastly important it is for us to provide consistent security for children before the age of 8, constantly letting them know that you're the adult, you've got them, you're the decision maker. They might not like it, but you're the decision maker. They are safe. Like, that is the way to creating a safe and stable adult, period. And we just struggle with that because our stuff gets in the way. Like, I'm the first in line with that. So, yeah.
Are we the same person?
Probably. Yeah. We just got separated. Weren't you at that surgery? I was.
No, I don't remember. I have short-term memory loss.
Yeah. That's a side effect.
Yeah, that's actually, so I think in one of your episodes, you were discussing kind of about when, before you had your children, you were kind of having the fear of either repeating or letting this carry through. And I have that fear. I really want children someday. Obviously, I've got to have certain ducks in a row.
Yeah.
First.
Not always. There's so much medicine and magic out there. You just do whatever works for you, girl.
I don't know. We need some miracles, I think. But no, I really related to that, because it's like, the amount of guilt and carryover from experiences, you start to really doubt yourself, and then you begin to fear yourself and create a monster out of yourself in your own mind, like as if you're not worthy of something. And that's a frustrating process.
And I'd love to speak to that, because I see it a lot, and I therapize a lot of my friends occasionally in this area, because I think it's so common. And I am a really, really good mother. And I also screw up on the daily. And I think that the difference between me and some of the parents that I've experienced are that when I make an error, I own it.
Yeah.
And I do what I can to not make that error again. And I say to my children, just like anything that I'm trying to do new, it's going to take a while and a lot of practice for me to get good at it. And so I'm going to own this as many times as it's going to take until I finally freaking get it. Yeah. But I'm going to own it, and I'm going to work on it. And I need you to have grace with me. And there's a very, very big difference between me owning it and taking responsibility and trying to correct my behavior, and parentifying my children and making my children feel as though I'm weak or not capable of keeping them safe. And that's a lot what we do, because we want our kids so badly to be expressive and to have their own voice and that we forget that our kids need an adult to remind them where the boundaries are, to remind them that they're safe, to remind them what the rules look like. The more they have consistency and predictable environments that are nurturing, the more successful they're going to be. Period.
Yeah, because you have to deal with that in the adult world. So you might as well get prepped for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not to compare children to dogs, but I will use this correlation that, dogs, like I have a rescue they've had for a couple of years, and she's so anxious. She reminds me of myself in dog form. But what they, after doing research about dogs, they're looking for that pack leader, not somebody to boss them around or be mean or push them, but sometimes to be the authority, to show them what they need to do, to direct them. There's always a pack leader, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And
if they don't get it, then that's where your behavioral issues come from.
Well, it's like teachers, right? I mean, I'm blown away that one person, usually in their early 20s, has the capacity to manage a room of 30 plus people. I'm like that, who are 5.
I don't understand.
I can't even do that with one 5-year-old, let alone 30 of them. But what it is, the trick is, it's consistency and predictability and nurturing. They know what's expected every single day. They go into that room, and at 10:02 they know it's reading time. At 11:15 they know it's lunchtime. At 12:32 it's and why they always do it on like at the 2s or the 33 or whatever. I'm like, how about just 12:30? Let's just try that. Why does this class period have to be 17 and a half minutes long? Anyways, but they know, like kids know every single day. I can say to my son, what are you doing at 12:30 in the morning or 12:30 at school? And he'll be like, oh, that's my recess. And I mean, and he doesn't really know because he doesn't have executive functioning skills yet, but like he can tell me his entire day, every single day. It's predictable and it's consistent. And he knows if you make an error, you're going to get reminded. And then if you make another error, there's going to be consequences for that. He knows that.
Yeah.
Well, and to shift this back to something we were talking about earlier, I kind of want to get a little bit more of your insight on this is what really truly interests me. And I've heard you talk about the ways in which like childhood abuse and trauma affect victims well into adulthood. So, we've talked about that. But even after the abuse ends, the long lasting effects continue. The impacts can range from like alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual or physical assault of others, or, just sexual abuse of yourself, mental and emotional illnesses, like depression or suicide, or, even criminal conduct and incarceration can be tied to
it's
these
like
things.
97% of incarcerated people have a child abuse story.
Yeah. So with abuse having such serious impacts on, individuals, families, and communities, or even society at large, what is your general opinion of why it's not discussed more? Because clearly this has such
reaching everyone.
The tentacles.
Everyone.
It just reaches out, and like you said, it's this cycle that goes around and around.
Right.
But
well,
no
and
one's
one drop of
talking
poison
about it.
ruins the whole barrel of water, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. First, I want to speak on the impacts because just during COVID, I've personally had so much awareness, and I've watched so many of my clients and heard from so many survivors, like their stories of what's going on for them. And what's interesting is that I've heard more people who have had hearing loss. I've gotten hearing aids during COVID. More people who have vision impairment, more people who have dental issues and weight problems and hair loss, like you name it, right? All of these things that you wouldn't even think to correlate, but they do, because when you think about it, when we're little and we're in an abusive environment, or we experience major abuse and our body is so afraid of that happening again that we're always on alert, the fight or flight button is like, it's like riding the brake and the gas at the same time, right? It's like, it's always going like, just ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. And that energy that it takes to manage surviving is so much greater than somebody that doesn't live in an abusive environment. And so where do you get that energy? Well, you don't like get it from vitamin D or like everybody would be cured, right? It'd be better. You get that energy from other parts of your body. So we have to say the body, like I imagine it like a ship, right? And all the men at the bottom, I'm thinking of the Titanic, when they're all in like the lower deck, right? Rowing and throwing things and like coal into the burners, and we need more men down there. We need, and I don't mean discriminatory men. I'm just saying we need more people down there, right? Throwing coals in to keep us alive, to survive, to help that survival tendency to be ready for when we want to like go full steam ahead, right? And so we're going to borrow from our vision muscles. We're going to borrow from our ears. We're going to borrow from our teeth development. We're going to borrow from our skin. We're going to borrow from our fat breakdown systems. We're going to borrow from different parts of our body. And when you do that for the better part of too long, and for some people, it's an immense amount in a short period of time. And other people, it's a consistent amount for a long period of time. The health implications on our body later in life, usually around 25 is when you start seeing it, but right around 45 is when you start.
The past 3 years have been
right. Yeah.
kind of tank.
Yeah. We just like
I stand up and I'm like, gosh, I'm old. I need glasses. And they're like, aren't you youngin'? And I'm like, maybe.
Yeah, I don't feel young. I've had so much energy to stay alive that now my body has been operating like it's like a car, right? It's just operating on fumes for so long. It's like, how do you expect a car to keep going if you don't ever get an oil change?
I really love that you tied that into physical effects, because we've had, Kelly and I have had experience with a lot of people who are naysayers of psychology and mental health. And the thing is, like, they're the same people who would say, yes, if I have broken my arm, I should probably go to the doctor, get a cast, have them, a professional who knows how to fix that. Let's go take care of that physical problem. But they keep forgetting that your brain, where all of these emotions and, they keep trying to make it a heart problem, but it's like, our brain is this organ. It's a physical body part. Yeah. And it literally ties to everything.
It's the engine, right?
It's the most physical thing. So we should take it way more seriously as far as health goes. I mean,
which I am like I'm very much guilty of that too. And I'm a therapist. But I do want to say that one of my favorite, like my daughter and I watch One Day at a Time together. And one of my favorite episodes is the neighbor. He is like my favorite guy ever. And the mom is struggling with depression. And so she takes medication, and then she's feeling better, and she goes to group therapy, but she's feeling better. So she quits group therapy, and then she quits her medication because she's better. And then she goes into a really, really deep depression, and she goes over to visit Schneider, and she's telling him, I don't want to count on these. And so he takes his glasses off, and he like goes cross-eyed, and he's like, yeah, that's like me saying, let's go for a drive. And it's just so funny. I need these glasses in order to stay safe. Right? Like I would not put you in a vehicle if I'm cross-eyed and I can't. It's so funny. And so it's
the perfect example, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
So we were talking about the physical implications and the long-term effects. But there was something else that you had said, Kelly, that was like the second part of the question, and I started with the physical. Do you remember?
Oh yeah. Well, it was all about, and I think each and every one of us maybe on this call could probably tick off one of the boxes over either whether it's alcoholism or drug abuse or mental and emotional issues like depression, or criminal conduct, which thankfully I have not dipped a toe there.
Yeah.
but why the society at large does not discuss this as I read something that said that, the amount of children that die every day due to child abuse and neglect is like 4 to 7. That's in the United States alone. That's massive. Like why on earth would we not be talking about this every single day? Like why is there not like all the biggest and best brains put on this task to end this? Because like you've talked about, it's totally preventable.
Yeah.
It's all about education. But why do you think people, tend not to talk about this?
Well, I think a lot of reasons. One is, and the first is shame. And it's shame of everybody. So people don't like when I say this, but perpetrators have a lot of shame. A lot. Their shame is oftentimes what leads them to perpetrate. Bystanders who may have an inclination that something's going on that don't do anything, or that are trying or don't say or do anything because they don't want the wrath, or like we don't want to mess up status quos. A lot of times you find that in interfamilial abuse, when like the abuser is a father and also the breadwinner. And so like, let's not disrupt the household because we'll lose everything if dad goes to prison, right? And so there's that expectation, or like trying to keep up the image. And so the bystander feels an immense amount of shame too. And then the victims also feel an immense amount of shame, because most of the time we have our instinct, and we oftentimes with our kids, whether it's an abuse or not, we kind of train our children to not trust their instinct. And then we send them off at 18 and like, okay, good luck, go trust yourself. And then usually they make a lot of mistakes. And then right around 30 for women, 40 for men, they're like, oh, wait, I have this instinct. And then they have to like relearn it and retrust it. And it's like, oh, Lord, if we would have just followed through with that for all these years. But we, that instinct when we're children and we're in these awful situations says that what's happening isn't right. And for sexual abuse victims, I can say for myself, and I've heard for many, many, many sexual abuse survivors, that there is, unfortunately, there's pleasure that comes with sexual interaction. That's why babies find their genitals at 3 months old, 6 months old. They're like, what is that? And that's not because they're being inappropriate. It's because they were given a body part that has sensation. And so then there's shame for having any sort of that experience with it. There's shame for not stopping it. There's shame when another family member becomes jealous of the relationship with the perpetrator and the victim. There's just, it's shame. And that would be the first thing. The second thing is that, like many, many things, when we feel shameful, we don't talk about it. And so when we don't talk about things, it's easier for it to fester and live and boil and become just this nasty thing. And it's easy for it to grow. And most abuse, if not all abuse, happens in isolation. Most parents do not hurt their kids in public. And the ones that do, like, that's a big, big red flag, because you know that at home it's 10 times worse.
Exactly.
Because every single human has the impact of influence. And so we know that all parents are their worst to our children. I am my worst human to my kids, period. End of story. Am I proud of that? No way. But I know that my kids will love me anyways. And my kids are their very worst selves to me. And that's because at the end of the day, I'm going to love them. I am their mom, and I'm going to have their back, period. Does that mean we're atrocious and we're monsters and we're No, not at all. It just means like, we got to get it out somewhere. And I'd rather them get it out with me than at school or on some stranger or on their friends, like that's what we are. That's what I am.
That's the human condition.
Right.
Frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing is that, the third thing is just that parenting is the only thing in this world that we do not regulate until it's a problem.
Yeah.
And then we regulate. And then we come in, usually between 22 and 30 years old, without our own experience of being a parent. I was the best mom before I ever had kids. I just want that to be noted. I really, really was. I could tell everybody else what to do. And then I had them and I was like, son of a bitch. But anyways, and then we come in and we try and tell families what they're doing wrong. And when you tell anybody what they're doing wrong, they're going to be
not received well. It's not.
Yeah. They're going to feel shameful. They're not going to ask for help. They're going to fear that their kids are going to be taken from them, and so on and so on and so on. And so we don't teach children how to parent. We don't teach children how to be parented. We don't teach parents how to parent. We don't do any of that. We don't regulate any of it. We don't create support around it. And unless you're at risk, which I think is complete bullshit. Is it okay if I say bad words?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm the worst offender.
Okay, good. I think it's complete bullshit that we have this category of at risk. Like, who gets to determine that? I was without a doubt an at-risk mom, a first-time mom. I was a survivor. I was severely anxious. I had depression, and I had postpartum depression in bad ways. I couldn't tell my husband because he was like, when I finally did, my daughter was 5 months old, and he was like, should I take our baby? Should I trust you? And I was like, you son of a bitch. Like, that is the worst thing you could say to somebody that is seeking help and support. But anyways, I mean, I was at risk, but I was a master's level clinician. I was a successful Caucasian woman, and it's like, wait a minute, I have a problem with that. So you're either at risk or you have unlimited resources to get the support that you need. And that like eliminates 75% of our population. Yeah. And so we don't make it a normal thing. Like some of these prevention programs that are out there, there's thousands that are amazing prevention models, but they're programs. They're not like when you have a lump, you get a mammogram, or every time I go to the doctor over the age of 40, she checks my breast to make sure that I don't have a lump. I get a pap smear, every 2 years because they're trying to prevent me from getting cancer. That's a basic health right, period. Exactly. I didn't ask for it. I don't want somebody like, I'm not like, oh, could you please hurt me and take something out of that really private place? Make sure that I don't have cancer. Like, no, It's a health right to keep people alive.
Yeah. And I do think that part of what this is a whole other discussion, hopefully for another time, if you would ever be willing to have that discussion again. But I feel as if personally growing up in the 80s and 90s that is there a puppy?
Yeah, she's a moose. She's a 105-pound St. Bernard.
8-month-old puppy. Oh, yeah, we all have the puppies.
What a cutie.
Yep. We put a baby gate in. Clearly she got through it.
My little pup is right down here.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw it scratching at the door like, hey, there's the exit. Will you let me out?
He's like, Mom, I'm tired. Please. Well,
it's boring, Mom. But I do think that growing up in that time period, like you were saying, there's a lot of stuff that kind of, you can see shifts over time. And we've talked about like homeschooling pretty specifically in the past, but the 60s and 70s being so pivotal in the movement towards like deregulation completely of homeschooling parents. Yeah. But so I think the same thing can be said of just abuse and neglect, I think that there is that shame, but there was always this attitude, specifically when I was growing up, that it's none of your business. And so, like you may have known something terrible or off was going down in someone's home, but it wasn't your business. You just walk away. That's family stuff. That's
their home. Their
behind
call.
our closed doors. Yeah, I get told that on still to this day, and I think that that's because there's still a generation of people that operate that way. Like we still have people alive. And that is messed up of me to say it that way, but like, it's just a generational belief. It's a belief system. Like millennials have their own cultural belief system. And I don't know what generation it is who are like 60 and above. I can't remember is that generation?
Are they boomers?
Baby boomers? I think
they're the boomers.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that mentality of like, this is our business. And my grandparents' age, who were 80s and 90s, their generation was one of family and community and like honor, like you go and you fight because that's your duty, and you help your neighbor because that's your duty. And then it shifted in the 60s and 70s.
I think it had a lot to do with patriotism too. Like we are a free nation. Mm-hmm. We are free to make the decisions on our own. We don't need to be regulated because that goes against the properties of a free nation. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of patriot kind of, I feel like it got crazy.
There's still the same people who get a driver's license. There's still someone who by law has to get a driver's license to operate a vehicle. So there are clearly things that as a society we accept as being in our best interest. But what I want to kind of ask you about, Lori, is your specific, I know that we're getting down to it. We're getting close to, having taken up your whole day. But
I have all day. It's fine.
So with EndCAN, if you could tell people a little bit about it and what you guys are hoping to do, I would like to hear a couple of things specific to like the plan of what we can do as citizens and as people and individuals to step in and help push that change, not just educate people, but push for change in our law. Because if you think about it, as a government, we should be looking at our citizens all as every single person matters. Every single person could be, like you said, at risk, no matter what their income level is or their background. Kids are our future. There should really be some better parameters in place.
Like so we were all one at one point. Every single one of us. Like nobody got to skip that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But isn't it funny how like when we become adults, we think we know best. And I can genuinely say that my children know more than I do, hands down. Except maybe my 14-year-old at the moment, certainly exhibiting some behaviors that I'm not supposed to. Just kidding. She's like an incredible person, but COVID has really had an impact on her schooling. Anyways, side note, I digress. EndCAN. So, okay, I'm going to just rewind a little bit just to give a little backstory of how EndCAN even came to be. So after my abduction, I was taken to this place called the Kemp Center for the Prevention and Treatment of Child Abuse and Neglect. And it was a program. Can you hear that? Is that really disruptive?
No.
It's fine. I'm like, what the? Anyways, and it was in this house, this old house on Oneida Street. And when I went there, I had gone there because the police department I had done a lineup to identify my kidnapper, like behind a two-way mirror, sat on my mom's lap, and like all these men came in and they had to like step forward and say some line. And I like man number 4 was the bad man. So they took that video of me identifying him to the Kemp Center. And they asked this doctor there, who was the director, his name was Dick Krugman. And they said, is this admissible or is this reliable? And he said, for court. And he said, yeah, it's reliable, but it's not admissible. And so then he had this psychiatrist named David Jones, who was this British doctor. I love David Jones. I love British accents. And
It's
so
wonderful.
he just makes me so happy. And anyways, he did this forensic interview of me. And so behind another two-way mirror, Dick Krugman, who's the director, is like videotaping me and David Jones like talking and I'm being interviewed by him through play. And then the defense attorney and the DA attorney are both behind the mirror asking questions into a phone, like a earpiece, to David Jones, which like was completely unheard of in 1983. And so we have 5 videos of me describing everything that happened, and which ultimately led to my abductor pleading guilty. And he got 10 years in prison. And then fast forward to my senior year of high school, I was writing a term paper on child abuse, and I reached out to Dr. Krugman, who was then the dean of CU Med School, and I went and interviewed him. And then after that, every 2 years or so, he and I would have lunch. And then when I was in graduate school, my second class in grad school, my teacher said, surround yourself with people you want to be like. And I was like, shit, I don't know anybody that's like went to college, let alone like that has a master's degree. Like all of my family work like in the service industry or like are more blue collar. And so I was like, I'm in big trouble. The only person I knew that had any like career, right? Like this fancier job was Dick Krugman. So I reached out to him and asked him if he would be my mentor. And of course, but he said very humbly, he said yes. And anybody that's ever met Dick Krugman, you would not know that he's truly a genius. And you wouldn't know that he got accepted into Princeton at 16, that he got into med school at 18, like he went to Juilliard. Like he is a freaking genius. He's the third person to ever get the polio vaccine because his uncle invented the polio vaccine.
No way.
Yeah. Like his cousins, one cousin was first person, second cousin was in second person, Dick was third, and Dick's sister was the fourth person to get the polio vaccine.
What?
Like he comes from a family of like royalty in the medical world. And then he was the dean of CU Med School for 25 years, which like on average deans make it 2 to 5 years. But this guy is like so cute and sweet. And like, he's like Winnie the Pooh. He's just darling. And I love him so much because he's saved my life. He's changed my life and he's believed in me. And so when he was my mentor, every few months we would get together and have lunch, and we always talked about how being in the med school, he saw leukemia, heart disease, cancer, all of these other things, breast cancer specifically, completely change. And like the deaths went down, the prevention went up, the education went up, the policy laws changed, research was just through the roof because people invested, because there was a national foundation for each one of those things, helping it. And for me, I related to the LGBT movement because when I was a little girl, when somebody was gay, I thought that they literally lived in closets. And I remember I was like 8 and asking my mom and dad why people would have to live in a closet. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I we had this big, long discussion, like, why do they have to come out of the closet? That doesn't make, like, that's just not okay. Why do they live there in the first place? And now, like, I don't even hear that expression anymore. It's not even a thing. My kids don't even know that as true. My kids are now talking about how pangender, all these things that I am so not educated enough on. And I'm grateful that my kids have that learning. Because it's all inclusive. And I think, man, if that could happen for the LGBT movement, a population that so many people are morally and there's a lot of people that are against it. And And that is for them. That's, we could get in the arena on that one too, but whatever. I've never met anybody that's against ending child abuse ever. And like, bring it into the arena if you are, like, the game on, because
I'll introduce you to my mother.
yeah, she's like, yeah, beat them, and I've met parents that believe that children need to be harshly disciplined and whatever, but I could go there. Anyways,
that's another topic for another day, because then it's all like the title of the episode is Rage.
Yeah, perfect. We'll go there. Yeah. So anyways, Dick said he was retiring after 25 years. And I was like, what are you going to do now? And he was like, I'm going to go back to work. And I was like, dude, you're insane. Like, how about you go to Europe? Like, what if you did what normal people do? And he didn't do that. So he stayed on as full-time faculty at the university. And then he asked me if I would run this national foundation. And so 3 years ago, we started for child abuse and neglect, what's been done for so many other issues. And it's called the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. And for short, because that's a giant mouthful, it's EndCAN, C-A-N, Child Abuse and Neglect. And our website's endcan.org. And so what we're doing is pretty different than what everybody else in the field does, because we're not a service provider. We will connect people and link people to resources. There are a lot of resources on our website, but we are not a resource doer. Instead, we are a fundraising organization, and our goal is to fund the field of child abuse and neglect and invest in research, invest in prevention, invest in education and training, and invest in advocacy, both from we all have a voice, let's use it, and from let's change some laws, let's change some policy, and get all of our children and families the support and necessary treatment and interventions that they need in order to stop this. And so through that, we're building just this army. And so we're having all these fun events. We had our first event of the year. It was the biggest event we've had since we opened on Thursday night, and it was amazing. It was online. We had huge singers, and we had Madeline Sackstrom got our Louder Than Silence award. She's an LPGA golfer and came out with her own abuse story this last year.
Wow.
She was awarded, and it was just so cool. It was such a good event. And we're doing our first national walk in the fall. It's endcan.org/walk together. If you want information on that. And like, we need thousands and thousands of people, like, come out. Like, we will pick our color, we'll pick our tutus, and we will just show up and have joy. And next year we're doing these college-based galas for college students, because I call them the pre-parent population, and they want to know. They want to know what to do, how to be involved, how to stop the cycle, how to not be raised the way that they were sometimes, or whatever, right? So we're trying to engage that group of people, and that age group. We have a Young Champions Council. We have a survivors platform on our website. We have an anonymous survivors platform where people can go anonymously and ask for help and ask for guidance and share their stories. God, what else? Just fun stuff. Like, it's fun. It's a lot of events. We're doing a gala next year where everybody's hosting their own 20-person dinner. And then I'm hopeful we can find some famous music group that loves us that will then have a private concert at the end of the night, and we'll all Uber and Lyft from everybody's prospective homes to an end of the evening happy hour and concert. So like, those are the things that we're doing just to raise awareness and raise money and, have more conversations and know that it's possible.
That's awesome. Kelly and I were talking the other day. We were really interested, and you kind of hit all of the points that we were going to ask in regards to EndCAN. We were like, okay, so, we've heard them discuss research, and raising awareness, but what goes behind that? What does that really mean in terms of action? Because, raising awareness, it sounds great, but then the next step is, okay, what are the actions we're going to do to actually make change? Because we could talk all day, but what are we doing? And just to tie into what you were saying, your mentor, what he was doing before and how he saw things change based on funding for these programs with effective research and how it grew from that. That really makes a lot of sense in what this organization can do, because if we actually focus resources, money, and doing real scientific research, that's where you're going to get laws and regulations to change, because they're going to want to listen to the data, to the science.
Sure. Absolutely. And that's what it is. Like nobody wants to fund research, but nobody will say yes unless there's research. Right? So it's like you can't have a job without experience, but I'm not going to hire you because you don't have experience.
Exactly.
Like, what? That's so confusing. But the other big thing that we're doing is what I call comorbid organizations. And so comorbid issues and organizations are cancers, are suicide, are mental illness, are the addiction world. And so this last 2 years, I have been meeting with CEOs and executives and thought leaders and change makers in those kinds of groups, because as we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, like vision, dental, health, suicide, mental illness, addiction, body image, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all of it. There is a huge correlation. And another group that we've partnered with this last year is the National Hemophilia Organization. And when I first heard them reach out to us, I was like, well, I don't know that child abuse causes hemophilia. And then when I talked with them, they were like, our parents get abused or get accused of being abusive all the time, because our children, hemophiliac children, bruise very, very easily. So they fight against the system on a regular basis in the opposite way, right? Like they are constantly being accused of being abusive parents when their children have hemophiliac and they haven't been diagnosed or whatever. And you're constantly having to advocate for yourself. Like, whoa, my kid.
I wouldn't want that pressure either. Like I can totally understand that defensive stance. Like
absolutely.
That's scary.
Yeah. And so we're like, we'll partner with you. We need to be educating doctors about what are signs of child abuse and how do we ask those questions, especially ER doctors, right? Like, how do we ask those questions? How do we engage with families? So we're not making false accusations on things that are really important and can be very, very scary for families.
Because to me, I feel like those voices are the ones that get heard the loudest, the ones in opposition of correct change being made. Like, for instance, with homeschooling, Kelly and I have discussed on a couple of different episodes where, somebody will try to have a petition, their child or their family member died as a result of child abuse from homeschool connections and, the homeschool association kind of backing them up. And so they went to their government and they were trying to have a petition to get some just very rational change. And this band of people come together to fight the regulation. And they're the loudest ones in the room for some reason. And it's
backwards.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Julia.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to piggyback on that because I think it's interesting that, it is the loudest voices in the room. So I think no matter what political spectrum you come from, I think we're just not educating people on these issues loudly enough. Because if it's in people's faces, they're going to have to do something. But, as far as EndCAN goes, I think it's super vital to, have that resource to give to people who are doing that work. And I hope in the future we can talk about like CPS in and of itself. that's something
that's
that
another 4 hour. We have a lot of work to do, ladies. There's so many conversations to be had.
Yeah. But the most important part is that I don't care where you come from on the political spectrum. We were all children once. We are all responsible for protecting the vulnerable, protecting those who cannot protect themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like our kids are already at risk, but I don't know if you know a lot about like homeschooling laws and you know the issues that brings.
Sounds like you two are pros. Sounds like you're both homeschooled.
Maybe, but you know, clearly not all parents are abusers, and clearly not all homeschool parents are doing it wrong.
But it certainly is an easier way. Like I said, abuse happens in isolation, and so and our protectors. So like that's why in COVID. We don't know. We don't know what the implications of abuse are.
It's going to be a couple of years before we have the full awareness
if not 20, right? Like when these children are adults and either have mental illness or there's a lot more mass shootings or whatever, right? Like we don't know, but we do know that abuse happens in isolation. And so and you already have like, even the most resourceful parents and the most stable parents have been stressed out this last 15 months.
Oh yeah.
So I can't imagine the families that lack the resources or lack the supports or lack the willingness to break cycles of abuse or whatever. It's just like, it's so scary. But yeah, I mean, the homeschool world, it is an easy hiding place for abusive scenarios to occur on a regular basis, because those other parents, the teachers, the coaches, the community, whatever, are not on those children. And so, not to say that, like you said, every homeschool family has abuse going on, and though it is definitely a venue for the possibility to occur at a greater rate.
Yeah. So,
and I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Julie.
Isn't it fun?
It's probably in a very different direction. So you go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, well, I was going to ask if there were any specific laws or reforms or bills that you guys are trying to get your backing behind that the audience can be aware of, whether it's in their state or their own community, or they can sign a petition or what?
Yeah, I mean, there's always things on the docket. So right now, like corporal punishment is a big one. There are still 16 states in the country that believe corporal punishment is a way to punish our children in school systems, which is mind-blowing to me. That is certainly something that EndCAN has been following. However, I want just to be really frank and real. We've been very intentional about not going down the advocacy route. We've been invited to be an advocate focused efforts. We sit on the National Child Abuse Coalition, and we've been a part of Family First. We've been a part of CAPTA. We've been a part of the emergency funding systems that have come out through COVID, and we sign our names on, we pass it around. We've certainly been on a bill for ending sexual violence against children. So we do all of those things. Anything that comes across where we have an army of people that are already in a yes, we're all for. However, we have not intentionally gone down the advocacy effort, because in order to effectively be advocates and to change law, you need millions and millions and millions of people. You need your policymakers to know there just is not another option. Like, in order for it to be true change, effective change, long-lasting change, and not just whoever's at the top seat in our presidential positioning in that moment for those 4 years, you've got to have tens of millions of people saying, yep, I no longer accept that my same-sex partner can't have insurance from me. I no longer accept that my same-sex partner can't be my spouse. That is not, and I'm a straight woman, for me, I believe that is the right of somebody that and that's just my personal opinion. People can disagree with me or not. I don't care about that. But my point is that we need people who are not just survivors. We need people like myself who I support that the LGBT community, not because I identify as any of them, but because that's their choice. That's their
I mean,
choice.
wasn't the big change in as far as legalizing gay marriage and everything, it was beyond those who identified as LGBTQ who came forward. It was like parents,
it's a civil rights issue.
Parents that cared. It was people who were straight, but their friends were gay, and they were like, they deserve to be happy. So it's really, and like it should be in this case with abuse, because again, like you said, it's all connected. You know, we all know somebody, and we should.
And I can honestly say, and it, like the time is here, right? In the last 4 years, we have seen more and more people stand up. We've seen them stand up and say time's up. We've seen them stand up and say me too. Unfortunately, both of those movements moved towards now that was the fifth reason. Remember earlier you were like, why is nobody talking about this? Why hasn't this happened? And the fifth reason is because we are a culture of blame. And so we quickly go to who is to blame and how can they be punished? And so that's what happened with both the Time's Up movement and the Me Too movement, is it became all about lynching and mobbing the offenders. And I get it. Like, justice is a thing. Justice is part of the healing process. It's part of the service, but that takes it completely away from the possibility of the rest of us who are like, I don't want to think about my offender anymore. I don't care where he is. People ask me all the time, aren't you mad that he only got 6 years in prison? Yeah, I'm mad. But am I going to spend my days mad at the world because of that? No, not at all. Instead, I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to hold the world around me to a certain level of integrity, and I'm going to keep going, because if I focus on that, I'm going to get lost and my voice will get lost. So that's what we do. And we can't do that yet. We're not ready. I don't feel like we're quite ready. We don't have enough of us. Like, I'm not going to go into a battle with just cavalry. I'm going to go into a battle when I've got my air, when I've got my naval, when I've got my army, I've got my Marines, I've got my snipers. Like, I need the whole shit, all of it. And then I'm going to go to war and fight, so
that and fine tuning the message, because I feel like, how we touched on earlier, when you try to tell someone they're doing something wrong, they're more than likely not going to be receptive.
Right.
I feel like
get defensive. Or they'll keep doing it just to piss you off.
Exactly. I feel like one of our problems, one of our bigger challenges, and actually making headway in this, is we haven't fine-tuned the message enough to make it clear that we're not attacking you. We are not trying to strip you of your rights. We are not, because we're so focused on, you mentioned justice, the term justice, and I feel like our society,
we talk about that all the time.
Our society's version of justice has just set back in time progress for so many issues, because we go forward, and
we're still carrying those pitchforks. They're just digital this time.
And there's a big piece to this, and I talk about this in my clinical practice all the time, and that's developmental growth. And what I find happens is that so between the ages of 18 and 25, we really begin to autonomize as humans. And then between 25 and 40, we begin to start our own family systems. And oftentimes what happens when we begin to start thinking about having our own family systems and have them is we turn and look back at our own families and we're like, whoa, what did you do? Right. And I can honestly say I do not have a good relationship with my parents at all. And at this point, I'm okay with that. For a long time, I would do anything I could just to prove to them that I was good and I was worthy, and like, please love me, and Look at, I'm prom queen, I'm homecoming queen, I'm student body president, like vice president, you name it, 4.0. Please love me, please approve of me. And it still wasn't enough. And so I'm done trying. And I am not going to say that my parents are awful people. They did the best they could with what they had. Would I do what they did? No way. Do I wish they had done it different? Without a doubt. Do I wish that they would just say to me, Lori, you are not to blame. You are not to blame for your kidnapping. I am so sorry that that happened. I'm so sorry that we didn't protect you and that happened. I'd give anything to hear those words, but I know I won't ever hear it. Instead, I will be called attention seeking, a liar, a greedy person, which like, show me the money. Like, I don't know where that is, but if I'm greedy, like I better start seeing some ramifications for that, but whatever. Right. I mean, I've been called all of these things by my family, not all of my family, but my immediate family. And it is painful.
Yeah.
And what we do is we look for the blame, and we look to blame somebody, and it just developmentally, it's normal and natural for us to not want to be like our parents. Every single adult is like, I'm not going to be like my mother. And then we sound like our mothers. We're like, son of a bitch, But I mean, that's just part of it. And we're not identical to our mothers, but we are part of who our parents. And when we can get out of even being mad at our own parents for being horrible and being mad at our offenders for doing horrible things, I think we'll have even more of an impact. And I don't know when that's going to happen or how that's going to happen, but that's asking a lot. It's asking a lot of me. It's asking a lot of us. And
we are the same person.
Like that's the next step.
It's official.
Yeah.
It's official. Good. You are the reason why I have the stretch marks and scars.
Yeah.
Now I know.
No, I think that's a great place to end, but I don't want to, because I actually have quite a few more questions for you, but we all have Saturdays. Yeah, I would really love that. And Julia, I know would too.
Oh yeah. Cause this topic has so many subtopics beneath it. And it's related to so many other relevant issues too, that are not only connected, but independent from this issue. So, I mean, we could literally go on and on. And
I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts and we have covered a lot of ground. We've covered more ground in the last hour and a half or whatever than I ever do. So this has been amazing. Yeah. Let's do this again, Saylin.
I would just like to ask you to give our audience something to actionable points that they can take, whether it be in their community, whether it be keeping an eye on, kids around them that, my friend and I had a discussion, and she had a neighbor whose kid was always showing up at her house, and clearly this kid was being ignored and neglected. And she's like, I never would have done anything before, but now I'm asking questions. Mm-hmm. I'm digging a little deeper. Yeah. So what can people do in their own personal lives?
That's my favorite scenario to answer, because what I invite everybody to do is be the North Star. Because every single one of us, I didn't need my mom and dad to be it. My parents were good parents a lot of the time. And they did the very best that they could. And I had a pretty good childhood in a lot of ways. And there were these people in my life that knew that it wasn't ideal. And those people I can count on one hand. And those people were not in my life my whole life. And those people couldn't take me away. But when those people were there, they just shined light. And they showed me that it was possible. My grandfather was one of them. My mom's mom, even though I was very, very young, I was only 5 when she died, and I don't have a whole lot of memories of her, but I feel her to this day. She was another one, and Dr. Krugman was another one. And those people are so far and few between that if I see a little kid in my neighborhood that wants to just come and hang out with me, that means that kid sees me as a light. And so I'm going to take the lampshade off, and I'm just going to shine brighter. And that doesn't like, it just means like, hey, I'm going to mow the lawn. You want to help? I'm going to cut the hedges. Want to help? Look, I'm going to be in the garden. Want to help? And it's like, not because you're trying to adopt this kid and bring him in and fix it and call the police or anything like that. It's just be the light. When I'm in the grocery store and it's my favorite thing in the world. Every time I see a little kid, I make a funny face at them and then I smile. And or I like say hi to them or whatever. I saw this little girl come out of an Italian restaurant the night before last, and I'm not kidding. She was drunk on spaghetti. I'm like not kidding. From her cheeks to her knees, she was red with spaghetti all over her, and her cheeks were so red, and she was like wobbling like she was intoxicated. And I was like, I mean, I just looked at her, and she was probably a light for me, but I just wanted to shine back for her. Like, man, you're special. And those are the moments, like it doesn't take much. It's quality over quantity. Yeah. And so that's the best giveaway I can say to everybody. And then just be a part of the change. Listen to these podcasts, come to our website, come to our walk, come to our events, like be a part of it. Raise your hand, join us. Like we need volunteers. We need a lot of volunteers. So be a part, and
make, I think another thing would be, to share those resources with people around you. So it continues to grow.
The ripple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they can find you at www.endcan.com.
Org.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As a 501c3, we're orgs. And so it's www.endcan.org. And like you can find our podcasts on there, our newsletter, volunteer opportunities, links to all of our different resources, our Survivors Story page, our Survivors Anonymous page. There's all sorts of stuff. All of our events, everything's on there. So
perfect. And I've been scrolling through myself. I told you she was, Julia. Guys, please do your part. Go visit her website. If you can donate, please donate. We have to show our support somehow. So either it's going to be, volunteering, doing something in your own community, or, taking part, in sharing these resources with other people who may be also survivors. So anyways,
cool.
Thank you so much, Lori. We are so grateful.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm going to stop talking. But
you were saying something. You were just saying
what did your friend say?
Oh, well, so we had a fundraising event online the night before last, and I challenged my friends this week to give $20 a month. And so like several of them did. And that's like $240 a year, right? Yeah. 20, yeah. I carry the one, minus the two. Yeah. But she, it's, cause I have one friend that has been doing that for the last 2 years. And then others are like, yeah, I could totally do that. It's easier to write a $20 check than it is a $240 check. And so it's just neat. I mean, it's just been really cool to like get it and make it happen and be a part of it. So.
Absolutely. Yay.
You are just so not only are you delightful, you are so inspiring, and you're radiant.
Oh, thanks.
You're talking about being the light. You are definitely a light. You're definitely a light. True.
That's debatable. I have to go argue something out with my partner now.
Well, you know what? If he or she questions it, it is nobody's perfect. We are all trying and well, most of us are trying and striving to change things. So, you're actually doing it. So, until next time.
Yes. I hope there is a next time. You both were so wonderful. Thanks for being voices and having this platform for people to talk. It's really, really remarkable.